Live Fit Podcast, episode 96. Sugar, part 8. Sugar Series Summary.
Welcome to the Live Fit Podcast with Glenn Johnson, your resource for all things that contribute to good health. You will hear expert advice and interviews with leading authorities on fitness, food, fat loss, mindset, and the mind-body connection. You will find show notes, articles, and health programs at livefitpodcast.com.
Yes, it is time once again for the Live Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Johnson, your guide to better health. Thank you, everybody, for listening. In this episode, I'm going to summarize or recap the last 7 episodes from my sugar series. But first, I'd like to ask you to please rate, review, subscribe, and most importantly, share this podcast with everybody you care about. It just might mean the difference between the good life and the miserable life. Also, if you feel like supporting it financially, please go to patreon.com/livefitpodcast. You can also find a link to that on the show note pages at livefitpodcast.com. If you have a question or comment, please feel free to email me at glenn@livefitpodcast.com, or you can leave a voicemail, and there is a link on the orange tab on the right-hand side of the website. I would really love to hear you. Now, let's get on with the show and the recap, the summary, and bottom line of sugar. Well, this sugar series started out way back in episode 89 when I explained what sugar is and how your body responds to it. So, a quick recap of that is sugar is another name for a simple carbohydrate. A carbohydrate is the starchy form that is in a plant, such as the stalk of a plant or the fruit, or such as the inside of an apple, the inside of a banana, the sugar that's found in oranges, things like that. It's also the white part of a potato, the bulk of a sweet potato. So you get the idea. That is a starch or a complex carbohydrate. There's oftentimes simple carbohydrates mixed in with them. In the case of an apple, there are some complex. There's also simple carbohydrates. There's fiber, and there's water, and various vitamins and minerals and other nutrients that the body uses. Now, every time we eat a carbohydrate, it has to be broken down into its simplest form, which is glucose, another name for sugar. It is the simplest form of sugar. It has to be broken down into glucose in order for the body to use it. Now, when we eat these carbohydrates, whether they're in a complex form, a medium complex, or just a simple form, I say medium because white flour is technically a complex carbohydrate, but it breaks down nearly as quickly as regular table sugar does and enters the bloodstream almost as rapidly. Now, I say that because when sugar enters the bloodstream, it definitely matters how much enters it and in what period of time. So if a lot enters all at one time, it's a big deal. Picture something like gunpowder, for example. You could have a pile of gunpowder and you could spread it out into a long line and light one end of it, and it might take 30 seconds to a minute to reach the other end. It takes a while. It's burning that fuse, so to speak. But if you had it all in one pile, boom, it goes up really rapidly. Now, one worse, stick it in a gun, tamp it down, and then light it, and it's explosive. So that's the idea of something that makes a profound difference, whether it's spread out over a long time or grouped together in a small duration of time, but still a large quantity. It can have a lot of damage. Now, when glucose enters the bloodstream, we have energy that flows around through the body, and it will be stored in our muscle tissue and in our liver, and some will be used immediately for energy. Now, anything that's left over will be stored for later use as fuel in the form of fat. Now, how does the body store that? What's the trigger that causes it to store it? Well, it's a hormone that you've probably heard of called insulin. Anytime glucose enters the bloodstream and that glucose level gets too high. Now, it's important to know that the body is a lot like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. See, Goldilocks wanted everything to be just right. She didn't want her porridge to be too hot or too cold. She didn't want her bed to be too firm or too soft. She wanted it just right. And that's exactly how the body works. The body likes glucose in the bloodstream. Not too much, not too little. Same with water. Not too much, not too little. Same with oxygen. Not too much, not too little. So you see how it works. It's like that with absolutely everything. Now, let's focus back on glucose. The body, like Goldilocks, wants there to be a just right amount. And there are certain mechanisms to play with this. If you get too little, there's a hormone called glucagon, which raises the blood sugar level. If there's too much blood sugar, it's going to secrete insulin, which will take the sugar out of the bloodstream and store it. Now, the interesting thing here is, and it's important to know for anybody who wants to lose weight, is whenever there is insulin present in the bloodstream, fat cannot be broken down to be used as fuel. Why? Because there's already plenty of fuel in the body. Glucose is your fuel. The sugar is your fuel. So if there's already fuel floating around in the bloodstream, the body is not going to break down fat and turn it into more fuel because it's already there. So think about that if you're trying to lose weight. The real takeaway here is that if you ingest carbohydrates in any form, insulin is going to be released. That is only a problem if you eat a large amount of carbohydrates. How much is a large amount? Well, it's going to vary. It really depends on how depleted you are. In the morning, you're depleted of carbohydrates quite a bit because you've been burning them as fuel while you've been sleeping. So that's why most breakfast foods are carbohydrate rich. Pancakes and waffles and cereal and toast and things like that. They're very carbohydrate rich to build up your stores of carbs again so you have energy to move throughout the day. The problem lies in when you get too much, and then you're not just filling up your stores of carbohydrates, but then you're converting the leftover into fat, and that's how fat builds up. And we can't lose that fat when we continue to eat carbohydrates in high levels. This is also how diabetes is formed, by the overuse and overtaxing of the pancreas. The pancreas makes the insulin. If we're constantly feeding carbs, then the pancreas is making insulin, and eventually it's just going to get tired and fatigued. And that is one way that type 2 diabetes is formed. So the next episode, episode 90, I talked about the most dangerous kind of sugar. Whoa, sounds scary, doesn't it? Well, I don't want to give away the whole farm, but it really is quite simple. Remember, I talked about consuming simple carbohydrates or sugars. Every kind of sugar breaks down into glucose. Now, there are two main types of sugar. Every type of sugar except fructose will break down into glucose before it passes through the gut wall. Then it goes into the bloodstream, circulates throughout the body, and goes to where it's needed, as I just explained. Now, fructose is a little bit different. It doesn't break down to glucose yet. It's different. It has to be broken down into glucose in the liver. So when we eat something with fructose in it, it goes in through a different passageway through our gut wall. Glucose and fructose use different doors to get into the bloodstream. Fructose is only metabolized in the liver. So any fructose you consume, whether it comes from an apple or a can of Coke, goes into your liver, and the liver has to process it. Now, that's okay in small amounts. And as I said before, it's quantity over time. So the amount that you're getting in a period of time is what really matters. You can get a lot of fructose over a long period of time and it's not harmful. You can get a small amount in a short period of time and it's not harmful. But the amount that's in, let's say, a soda that is sweetened with cane sugar or high fructose corn syrup is too much. It really is. So here's what happens. That fructose enters the liver. The liver has to metabolize it. It doesn't do a great job, especially when it's overwhelmed. And what happens is it leaves fatty deposits in the liver. People who do not drink alcohol can get what's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That is very similar to what happens with an alcoholic. When they drink too much alcohol, they get cirrhosis of the liver. That starts off as fatty liver disease because that fructose is broken down into glucose and triglycerides, and the triglycerides gather in the liver. And now you have all these little pockets of fat. When fructose is broken down, triglycerides are released. Some go into the bloodstream. That's how sugar can raise your triglyceride level in the blood. It also breaks down into glucose. So we are turning fructose into glucose eventually, but it's not going to do that if there's already glucose in the bloodstream. Any kind of sugar pretty much has glucose and fructose in it. Almost all sugars contain both of those. The exception is glucose. If you're consuming pure glucose or dextrose, you're not going to get fructose in it. But everything else is going to have both, or it's at least going to break down into glucose and be paired with fructose. I hope that made sense. Back to the liver. You drank a soda. The glucose goes into the bloodstream, travels around the body. The fructose goes to the liver, turns into triglycerides and glucose. Now, those triglycerides spread out throughout the bloodstream, but they also linger behind in the liver. And it'll eventually break down, but if we're drinking a soda, let's say every day, or we're drinking glasses of juice every day, it's just going to stay there and build up and build up and build up and build up. Not a good thing. So, what is the most dangerous kind of sugar? Fructose. Let's go one further. Liquid fructose. Why? Because you can get a whole lot in a short period of time. If you ate an apple, you are getting fructose, but not all that much, relatively speaking. And let's compare that apple with the juice of that apple. If you were to drink a glass of apple juice, how many apples do you suppose it took to fill that glass that you would have? So let's say an 8-ounce glass. Depending on the size of the apple, it could take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 apples. Are you going to eat that many apples at one time? Probably not. But even if you did, the amount of the fiber that is contained in that apple is going to slow down the absorption of that fructose into the bloodstream, and henceforth into the liver. The amount of water is going to help dilute it. And the fact that you have to chew it, bite it, and swallow it before it gets there is all going to slow that down versus drinking that glass of juice. I could down a glass of apple juice in seconds, where it would take me 20 or 30 minutes to eat 5 apples. Okay, so we see the amount of fructose that can just flood the liver in a short period of time. So the most dangerous kind of sugar is liquid fructose. Once again, fructose is found in all types of sugar except for dextrose and glucose. If you see sugar listed, if you see table sugar listed, honey, maple syrup, corn syrup, not just high fructose corn syrup, HFCS has more fructose than regular corn syrup, which is only about 20%. But HFCS is about equal with table sugar in its glucose-fructose combination. So there really isn't a big difference between the two. Agave is the worst of them all because it's about 90% fructose. All right? Honey, sure, it's natural, but it still is about 50-ish% fructose, give or take. So no matter where you get your sugar, you're pretty much going to get fructose as well. So the less you eat, the better. The slower it absorbs into the bloodstream, the better. So let's just stay away from liquid sugars, okay? Now, my next podcast, episode 91, I interviewed a man named David Gillespie, and he wrote a book called Sweet Poison. And in this interview, he talks about his book, Sweet Poison, and how he found it. See, David is not a scientist. He's not a doctor. He's a corporate lawyer. This actually gives him the unique ability to research, very thorough research. See, David was suffering from obesity. He was overweight. He would go on a diet, lose some weight, gain it back. Go on a diet, lose some weight, gain it back. And this kept happening, and he was getting really sick up and fed of it. And he wanted a long-time solution. He didn't want to just go on a diet after diet after diet after diet. He was feeling lousy. Every time he gained the weight back, he would gain back more. He felt bad about himself. Physically, he felt really, really bad. What he found through his research was the answer to his constant and repeated weight gain, and this was sugar. To be more precise, as I just mentioned in episode 90, fructose and how it affects the body.
Sugar definitively causes people to not only be overweight, but gives them fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, chronic kidney disease, and a whole cascade of diseases by virtue of the way it is metabolized. None of that evidence appeared to be, at least in anything that I had ever seen. And instead, there was all of this talk about, eat less saturated fat, eat less cholesterol, exercise more, all of that kind of thing, all of which I had tried, but none of which seemed to work unless you were massively determined to apply huge amounts of willpower. And I thought, well, if what the science says about fructose is true, then the way it works its magic of making us fat is by interfering with our ability to control what we eat. So it messes with our appetite control system, our autopilot, the thing that every other animal on the planet relies upon to maintain their weight automatically.
David has taken his family completely off of fructose, except in its most whole, natural form. They'll eat bananas, they'll eat apples, they'll eat oranges, etc., but they will not have the juice of any of those. They will not cook any of those. And they certainly will not drink soda or Tang or any of these other fructose-sweetened beverages or foods. But you know what? They still have sweets. They will have desserts now and then. They make their own ice cream, and they sweeten it with dextrose. You can buy powdered dextrose. It looks a lot like sugar. When you taste it on your tongue, it doesn't taste very sweet because it doesn't have fructose in it. Fructose is what makes sweet things taste so sweet. It's still a little bit sweet. And the beauty is you get used to it. So the less sweet you eat, the less sweet you want. Now, you can still have these cookies and ice cream and still enjoy your sweet treats. It's just not that bad for you. In fact, I would go as far as to say the ice cream that David makes is not bad for them at all. The cookies they make, not bad for them at all. So why not? That's a win-win. That literally is having your cake and eating it too. All right, David. Next up is episode 92, where I interviewed Michael Moss. He wrote the book Sugar, Fat, Salt. Michael Moss is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. He used to write for the New York Times, but he also wrote this book because he was really interested in what the food industry was doing to hook its customers and keep them hooked. He explains that the food industry found the bliss point between these three ingredients: the sugar, the fat, and the salt, and different ratios for different types of foods, but basically there is a bliss point. And once that bliss point is reached, when a human eats it, not only do they like it, they love it, and they feel compelled to eat more and more, and they really honestly can't get enough. They are not only hooked, but they crave it. And even when their belly is full, they still want to eat more because that mouth feel and the stimulation that goes on into their pleasure center of the brain is at a peak, and we love it. I'm sure you've experienced that too. I've eaten things that just went, wow, that's amazing. Be scared if that happens. Be very, very scared. Michael explains some of the things he found while researching for his book.
I write about a meeting in the book in 1999 when the heads of the largest food companies get together very privately, brought together by a cabal of insiders inside the companies who are increasingly alarmed about their culpability in the emerging obesity problem. And they're being urged by these people to do something collectively to turn the corner and truly kind of reformulate their products and look at their marketing to be truly healthier. The CEOs decided to do virtually nothing during that meeting, but last year there was another very public meeting in Florida where they are addressing financial investors, and one by one they're reporting dismal profit earnings, and the more forthright upon them are attributing it back to more and more of us caring about what we put in our bodies and making purchase decisions. Sales are going down on the worst stuff in the grocery store, so they're scrambling now to try to lessen their own dependence on too much salt, sugar, fat to make their products, and it's a real problem. It's a little bit of an emperor has no clothes thing. So you start whacking back on those things, there's not a whole lot left to many of these products.
Next up, I interviewed a life coach and fitness expert named Jennifer Powter. She has years of experience working with women who wanted to transform their lives. And yes, she agrees that a diet that includes sugar degrades a person's health, and most importantly to her and her clients is it thwarts weight loss. In this episode, Jennifer gives practical, tactical advice to deal with those sugar cravings. You can eat and you can quench your sugar cravings without giving into them.
For me, if I've got a sweet craving, actually one of my favorite go-tos is cucumbers with salsa. The spicy of the salsa takes away the craving for sweet. And so maybe because you've had the spicy already, then who knows what actually is happening there on the taste buds. I do know though that like say you were to give into that desire to have something, and say if you had some emotional stuff going on too, the way that sugar acts on the brain in terms of what gets stimulated up there, it becomes very hard sometimes to stop eating it because, and especially if you're tired too, which so many of my clients, their desire to eat some of the sweet or the salty stuff happens often later at night. A lot of my clients are busy, they're working, they're parenting, they're volunteering, they're living big, full lives. And so often they don't get a lot of, downtime or quiet time or me time until 9, 10 o'clock at night. And so then they want to claim those 2 hours to just sort of, relax, when often what they really need to do is go to bed,
I'm sure many of you are thinking, okay, Glenn, enough. Sugar's bad for me. I'll stop eating sugar. There's plenty of diet foods out there. I'm just going to have a diet soda instead. I really hope you don't do that, and I hope I'm going to change your mind right now. In episode 94, I spoke with Dr. Janet Hall about artificial sweeteners. Aspartame in particular, and aspartame, by the way, is the most common artificial sweetener. Sometimes goes by different names. It's sometimes hidden, hard to read. Down there at the bottom, because they don't need to use very much, so it might even be the last ingredient. But let me tell you, it is very dangerous. And I know this because in 1991, Dr. Hull began drinking 1 Diet Cola a day after work. She was a professor at a university in Dallas, and she had an hour drive home in the afternoon or evening when she got out of class. She bought herself a Diet Cola from the vending machine on her way out and drank it on the way home. What's the big deal, right? No calories, a little something to do, keeps her from snacking and eating. Sounds like a great plan. She didn't see the harm, as, most of you probably don't. For about a year, she did that, and then she started coming down with really weird symptoms. She had trouble seeing, she was kind of shaky, had mood swings and very strong emotions and anger and things like that. And she went to the doctor, and they told her that she had really high thyroid levels. And they deduced that she had Graves' disease. They wanted to zap her thyroid, kill it, and she would have to take thyroid medication for the rest of her life. She didn't want to do that. She was an environmental toxicologist, and she felt that it just wasn't a natural thing for that to happen. She's never had that in her family, and she just believed, she just knew that it wasn't her body breaking down all on its own. So she set out to find the answer. And the first thing she did was she cut out that Diet Cola and any other forms of aspartame she may have been ingesting. And you know what? She felt better almost immediately. Within 6 weeks, she started noticing a difference.
Every single week, my thyroid levels and my blood levels and my heart and blood pressure and cholesterol and the whole thing were going back to normal. So when I told the doctor what I had done, he just sort of rolled his eyes and he said, I'm the doctor, you're not, you don't know what you're doing, I don't know anything about aspartame or NutraSweet, you can't cure Graves' disease. I then began to research the history of aspartame. I have all the original research that was done on aspartame. I met with all of the original researchers, and there is no doubt whatsoever that this product was toxic. They knew it was toxic from the very beginning.
And yet, aspartame is still being added to foods and beverages and chewing gum. Still, today, there is research and proof positive that this stuff puts holes in your brain and damages your body in many different ways. Yet, it's still on the market. It's illegal in many countries, but it's still on the market in the United States. Somebody else who else is mad about the way things are going in this country is Dr. Joel Fuhrman. I interviewed him in episode 95. Now, Dr. Fuhrman had a lot to say. I could have spoken with him for twice as long as I did. He wrote a book about reversing heart disease and diabetes, as well as several other books that I'm sure you will find fascinating and valuable to your good health. He says diabetes and heart disease are caused primarily by nutritional stupidity and the malpractice in the worst kind of your physician and the government. He says that primary care practitioners are undereducated about nutrition and that the government is being supported by the companies that profit the most by you buying the foods and drinks that damage your health. Michael Moss said pretty much the same thing. Dr. Fuhrman renamed the standard American diet, you've heard of that, SAD, to the Deadly American Diet. DAD, it's not such a cute acronym, but it's really more powerful and more meaning. And he, jokingly maybe, says that our diet was created by Al-Qaeda. And I don't disagree at all, because it really is a more thorough act of terrorism than a bombing or a shooting. And the worst part is, the U.S. government supports this slow poisoning of its people for its short-term profit and or its inability to stand up to the strong lobby groups. And we are exporting this fast food, nutrient-poor mentality to other parts of the world. Well, I guess that evens things out. If we're all sick, the rest of the world might as well be sick and dying as well. And then people sit around and wonder why diabetes and obesity and heart disease and cancer rates are skyrocketing. Dr. Fuhrman talks about sugar as the root cause of addiction.
I'll say something radical right now, but I think it's true. And I think that the early life addiction to sugar and which affects dopamine and other serotonin and other hormones in the brain, other neurotransmitters in the brain, and makes you, and then leading on to addiction and, overconsumption of alcohol. But that mixture makes people not only affects them intellectually and ability, but also can make them predisposed for drug addiction. And so I think that it's all intertwined, because the sugar is an addiction just like a drug. And we have a whole society in America that's essentially addicted to substance abuse. And the main substance they're abusing is food. We have a population that's addicted to overstimulating the body as a means of pleasure and of living life. And it's really, and people's objection, they're listening to this and they're thinking to themselves, I realize we shouldn't probably eating junk food and it's not good for us, but I'd rather just live a shorter life and eat what I want and not be so fanatical about food and health, because I'll enjoy my life more if I'm able to socialize and enjoy unhealthy food and unhealthy drinks and alcohol and things like that. And so they don't understand that's that myth, these addictive behaviors take over the brain, the primitive part of the brain, leading to irrational, illogical rationalizations like that to make people think that they're going to be happier with their being as sick as they are and being addicted to these substances like nicotine. The cigarette smokers do the same thing. They say, I can't quit, and I'd rather just live my life and enjoy it. I enjoy smoking, and I'd rather die a shorter life. But they don't understand that that's part of the addiction, that people think they're enjoying their life more when actually when people really do quit, they find that they were deluding themselves. It didn't make life more enjoyable to smoke. It made life less enjoyable. And when you're an addict, you don't do better with your family and with your love life and the relationships and the ability to feel and care. And
these 7 episodes give compelling reasons why removing sugar from your life is a good idea. Why do people still consume sugar when they know it's bad for them? I've talked to many people that say, yeah, I know it's bad for me. I'm having neurological issues. I'm overweight. I've got diabetes, all these things, and they still won't give it up. Why? I have 4 thoughts on this: habit, taste, energy, societal pressure. First one is habit. People are used to eating and drinking in a certain way. Maybe they're used to eating something sweet after dinner. Maybe they're used to drinking something sweet with lunch. Whatever it is, I'll bet you they're doing it out of habit. If they've been doing it for a long period of time, not a lot of thought goes into it. This is just what they always have. It's always been this way. I always have a soda with my burger, that sort of thing. I always have sweet tea with my lunch, or in the afternoon, or orange juice for breakfast. Whatever it may be, I'll bet you habit is a strong factor in it. Now, the next one is taste. Sugar tastes good. I know that. You know that. I don't deny that. I'm not saying that I don't like sugar. All I'm saying is these are the reasons that you should not consume very much. So we enjoy the taste, and that's a big factor. So often, maybe most of the time, we're willing to turn a blind eye to the consequences of the future somewhere down the road for some gratification and enjoyment right now. Now, another reason people say that they like sugar is because the energy it gives them, that little lift, that little boost. And I'm going to suggest that that's not just on a cellular level in your muscles, giving you energy, giving you quick energy. I'm going to say that's the addiction talking. That's feeding the addiction. If you're a smoker and you go too long without a cigarette, you know what it feels like when you have that first cigarette after a long time without. It feels good. And you also know what it feels like when you haven't had it. You really, really want it. You need it. You have to have it. You can't think of anything else. And it's been proven and proven and proven. And if you listen to episode 95, you'll hear Dr. Fuhrman talk about it as well. But sugar triggers the same pleasure center in the brain that other addictive drugs do, such as heroin and nicotine and alcohol and other things like that. So is it really the energy you want or that gratification for your addicted self? Okay, the last one is societal pressure. People are constantly throwing sugar at you. There's sugar pushers all over the place. You can't go to a party or a gathering without sugar, especially with kids. For some reason, people still think it's okay to give kids sugar. Oh, they can handle it. Yes, they can, just like they can handle cigarettes. They could handle wine. Why not get our kids addicted to cigarettes and alcohol at the age of 5? Think of how much more money they could pour into our economy, right? You see what I'm saying with this? You wouldn't do that. But you're giving them sugar, which is setting them up for future trouble and failure and health issues, okay? So screw society. Be your own self. Don't give that crap to your kids. I mean, if it's too late for you, at least save your children. Why is it too late for you? Because your parents gave it to you too? It doesn't mean they didn't love you. It just means they were misinformed. People have a lot of different reasons, and these 4 reasons that I just gave, they're not necessarily in that order. You might just have one of those reasons why you do it, but they're there, and those 4 reasons are there. So let me give you the bottom line with all of this sugar stuff. It's really quite simple. I'm not saying easy, but it is simple. Eat as little sugar as you can. The less, the better. And the less sweet taste you put in your mouth, the less sweet taste you will want. So once again, the less, the better. The less sweet you eat, the less sweet you'll want. When you want something sweet, opt for whole fruit, not juice. Never, ever, ever ingest aspartame. Seriously, guys, get that out of your diet. Even gum. It's hard to find sugarless gum without aspartame, but you can. I have a brand that I chew. It's called Pure, P-U-R, has the two little dots over the U because it's from Sweden. And it's good. It's not great, but it's good. And it's much better than chewing that aspartame and absorbing that through my gums and swallowing it, okay? So if you don't want caloric sweetener, stevia is the way to go. Stevia is natural as long as you get pure stevia, not Truvia, but stevia. You can go ahead and do that without harming your body. But once again, that sweet still makes you want more sweet. So you're better off lessening and lessening and lessening. And I don't expect you to do this overnight, but maybe take some baby steps and just gradually remove sugar from your life. Less and less and less. All right? I hope you like this summary. I don't mean it to replace all the other episodes. I really do encourage you, if you haven't already, to listen to episodes 89 through 95. There's much, much more information, especially from my guests. So I just wanted to give you a little taste, a little summary. Maybe you already listened to them. This is here just to kind of wrap it up for you. I also want to encourage you to try my sugar/solution. If you want to kick that sugar habit and you've been unsuccessful on your own, try my sugar/solution. It takes 10 days. You can jump in, follow these steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're done, and the sugar habit should be kicked for the rest of your life. Please let me know how that goes for you. I'm dying to know. I hope you enjoyed this sugar series. I'll probably talk about sugar again at some point, but I don't have any plans for the next 5 or 6 episodes. But do come back because I have some more great guests coming on, and I will talk to you again in a week. Take care, be well, and most of all, live fit.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Fit Podcast. Please subscribe and share with someone you care about. Read show notes, articles, resources, and learn more about our weight management programs at livefitpodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and always remember to live fit.